Hi, and welcome to the CalmWaves Podcast. I'm Dallas Cowan. I'm here joined by Mike Ahmed from the East Coast right now. We are in Phoenix right now. It is getting hot here, but Mike is on the cool side of the country. Before we jump in here, I kind of did a little bit of research on you beforehand, and it's really interesting your career and how you've even got to where you're at this point today. And so I just want to read a little bit about what I did, a little bit of research. One, you are, and we're going to talk a lot about this today, which I'm excited about because I think what you're building at Seven Pillar is phenomenal for a player and just the idea of it. So you're co-founder of Seven Pillar with your brother Nick. You're drafted by the Dodgers, which I grew up a Dodger fan, so I'm excited about that. You spent 7 seasons in the minor leagues. So you're a journeyman. You were grinding it out. And then you became a coach. So you have a degree in psychology and health sciences, which is, awesome because I think actually I want to go into that. I want to stop right there. Why did when you had the opportunity to, let's say, leave baseball, what made you want to go into get your degrees?
So, we can back up to, when I spent my first 3 years in college, played at Holy Cross in Worcester, Mass, and spent 3 years there before I was drafted. At that time, I really had no vision for my life outside of baseball. It was like baseball only. This is what I'm doing. And the degree or the path that I chose at that time was economics, and I didn't really have any desire, any passion in that area. It was just kind of like the closest degree that I could get in the business area, and so I thought it might have been the smart way to go. But again, I had no passion in that area, no real interest. For me, it was like all baseball, and that's what I wanted to pursue. And luckily enough, I got the chance to pursue it and play professionally for 7 years. So that was great. But during that time of when I was playing, obviously starting to think about, hey, what's going to make me the best athlete, the best version of myself on and off the field. So that was a big part of it. And when I was drafted back in 2013. I was drafted as a junior, so I didn't finish my degree in economics at Holy Cross. And so when COVID hits 2020, long story short, I retire. I was in spring training with the Diamondbacks at the time. I got sent home, released, and I didn't really know what was next for me. I had a young child, another one on the way, and so for me at that time, it was like, hey, is it time for me to hang him up and maybe pursue coaching is something that has been on my mind for a long time, or can I maybe continue to keep playing and just grind it out even more? At that point, it was like coaching had been in my heart for a long time. I had been doing the off seasons, and I actually got an opportunity. We can dive into this more, but I got an opportunity for the Mariners to go and coach, and so it wasn't really a super difficult decision for me to make at the time. So I dove into that, and once kind of that door opened for me, it was like, okay, how can I become the best coach possible? And for me, when I was playing, mindset was a huge part of it, and that helped me kind of grind it out as long as I did, and get the most out of the talent that I had. And so I was thinking, hey, like, what kind of degree, what kind of education could I pursue here that may help me become a better coach? And I ended up getting an interdisciplinaries degree from Liberty University. And it was in psychology, health sciences, and sport management. So it was kind of like, this is another reason, another avenue that helped us develop Seven Pillar. It's just like a very holistic approach to, how do we get athletes to become the best version of themselves. So that's, kind of long story short, that was like, for me, what was I passionate about, as an athlete? How can I become the best version of myself? And, that type of degree kind of really opened the door and kind of paved the way for Nick and I to found Seven Pillar and continue to coach in that direction.
That's awesome. I think I want to kind of take you back to the point where you're like, I'm kind of done with baseball. Like, what as a player, because I think everyone, no matter what, when they play, they're told they have to stop. Some do it in Little League, some do it in high school, some do it in college. You did it, right before, you got up to AAA. What was that like from and I want to ask, what was that like, and what would you tell your past self now that you're sitting here where you are today?
Yeah. So like I said, it was an interesting spot in my career. So I had played a few years in Double A. My performance had actually been kind of going downhill just a little bit. I had dealt with injuries. I had dealt with, pretty serious illness in the middle of my career. And so my body, like at that point, was starting to not feel great every single day, going through the grind. I had done it for 7 years. I love baseball. I want to be around the game. Like I said, I was kind of like in the middle here once COVID hit. I had gotten released. I probably had a chance to play again. Didn't really know what that looked like. But I got a call from the Mariners, and I had spent my last year playing with them, so developed some really good relationships with the front office and the coaching staff there, which led to that opportunity for me. And it honestly, like, it wasn't the most difficult decision for me to make. I did it with my family in mind. I did it with the ability to continue to stay in baseball, which is something that I loved and something that I had lived for, since I was 6, 7 years old and at a really high level for the last, 10 years or so. So for me, I think being able to stay involved in the game made it an easier decision. I think it would have been much harder if it was, hey, once I retire, I'm done with baseball and I'm just stepping into an entire new field. I think that would have made it a more difficult decision. But for me, I definitely felt some freedom in being able to step into that role and take my spikes off and get into the coaching role. Because for me, a lot of it too was I was kind of getting into that mode the last couple years, being kind of an older guy in Double A for the most part. I spent a little time in Triple A, but most of my last 3 years were in Double A. Honestly, kind of mentoring the younger guys, and that's something that I really done. Even when I was young in my career, there was always guys a little bit younger than me playing. I felt a good deal of satisfaction and fulfillment being able to do that. And obviously, as a coach, like that's what you're doing. Like that is your goal as a coach, is to mentor the younger guys, help them out any way that you can. And so, having that opportunity was made it a pretty easy way to kind of step away from the field and pursue the next step in my journey. So
It sounds like you have a natural way of saying, "Hey, I want to coach. I want to, bring people up." How did that, like going through single A, double A, having those types of things shape to seven pillar today?
yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it was, it's really started with, and we share this, but I think it started with my faith journey. I grew up in the Catholic Church, and always had a faith in God, but I didn't really know what that meant until really started asking questions kind of at the tail end of college. And then once I got into pro ball, there's this awesome ministry called Baseball Chapel. And you're playing on Sundays, playing on Saturdays. You can't really go to church. There's not really a community there for you. But every affiliate had a chaplain that would come, whether it was Saturday or Sunday, and give a short little sermon, talk to the guys, answer questions that they have. So I had the opportunity to go to Baseball Chapel, and then my first full year as a professional was actually really cool. 3 of my best friends that are still my best friends now, guys that I play with, went to Baseball Chapel, helped me kind of look at my faith in a different way and just build me up in my faith. And so, my faith mindset, like I always had these big questions of like, okay, how do I think about the game? How do I think about my life? What's the best way to pursue X, Y, or Z? Which led me, and Nick and I shared this too, and we got to train in the off season and pursue excellence together, and all that kind of like goes into it, always pushing each other. So it's my faith, it's our faith, it's pursuing things to the best of our ability. And then a big part of that too in our journey was, and especially my journey was, okay, dealing with injuries, dealing with being sick for a while. Okay, how do I get my body physically in the best shape possible? And so, to be an athlete, to perform at your peak, it's not just, your physical skills. It's not just your mindset. It's not just your health. It's all of these things combined. And so, as a coach and a performance coach now, I'm trying to combine all of these things together and say, hey, like, let's get you right with your mind, your belief set, your perspectives. Let's turn you into like an absolute competitor, right? Like that's a huge part of it as well. But let's talk about your nutrition. Let's talk about your recovery, right? Let's talk about your cognitive performance and how well you can perform in all of these different areas, so that as a whole, like we're becoming the best version of ourselves on and off the field. Because I saw, again, there's so many guys that were more talented than me that didn't last nearly as long as me. And there's guys that did make it and did perform really well, but they're having all sorts of issues off the field. They're dealing with anxiety. And so, hey, like, let's find this best ground, this middle ground, this best route to go where, we have this really good foundation for our life and our identity and who we are, but we're still pursuing excellence on the field. And I don't think it has to be an either or conversation. I think it should be a both and so that was really, that kind of perspective around performance and coaching. That's kind of really what led into Nick and I creating 7 Pillar.
What do you think is the thing that athletes out of the 7 pillars ignore, or the least thing that they like? Because people talk about, you got to get your body right, you got to eat good, and even nutrition might be something that I don't know how serious people are in that, just from an education standpoint. But out of the 7 pillars that you have, or just maybe a couple of them, what are people that neglect the most?
Yeah, I mean, our pillars are identity, mindset, lifestyle, relationships, nutrition, fitness, and recovery. So, like, the first 4 are more of the psychological pillars per se, and then like the last 3 are more physiological. And on the physiological side, like, there's guys who buy into all 3. There's guys who buy into 1 or 2 of them. So there's a big mix there. I think overall what's missing a lot is the identity piece. And that's why it's our first pillar. That's why it's, it's, we talk about it a ton. If guys don't know their value or where their value comes from, they don't have a set of grounding beliefs that they can kind of turn to when their performance is up, when their performance is down. Again, we're going to see all of these different, issues, both on and off the field, whether it's, family relationships, whether it's performance anxiety, whether it's burnout, and they don't last as long as they could have otherwise. So for us, like, identity is absolutely foundational to everyone, but especially as athletes who are in the the high performance realm. And it's like, hey, if you don't perform, you're out, kind of thing. So I think there's some guys that probably do a pretty good job of it, but overall, it's not really talked about a ton. And the way that we really approach it, both with identity and with mindset, is like, hey, what is your foundation? What are you building your life on? What are you building your career on? And we start from there, and then we can really dive into the physiological pillars as well.
I want to ask about identity, because what do you think? What's your definition of identity? Because I know you hit on it a little bit. You got faith, goals, who are you? But what is, because I think it's a word that's thrown around, but some people are like, I don't know, what does that mean? Like, how does that play out?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it can definitely be a vague word or phrase. Hey, like, what are you talking about when you talk about identity? Well, for me, like, I use a pretty simple definition that I come up with. It's like called the 3 S's. So it's number 1, where does your self-worth come from? Does it come from your performance or something outside of your performance? Number 2 is, what's your story, right? Like, what's the narrative that you're telling about your life, your career, where you came from, but also where you're going. And then the 3rd S is, what are your standards? So, like, what standards do you put in place for yourself on a daily basis to help you live, the way that you want to live? So it's self-worth, it's story, and standards. I call it the 3 S's. And from there, right, if you have a good answer for those 3 S's, you're going to have a pretty grounded identity and know who you are. There's other things involved in that. Like, we talk about your strengths and weaknesses and who you are and your passions, like your calling. I think that goes into it as well. I think that's probably part of your story. But for me, it's like, where does your self-worth come from? What's your what's your story? What's the narrative that you're telling about your life? And then what are your standards for living? Right, both on and off the field.
That's fantastic. I think that's probably the best definition of identity I've ever heard. Just because it's tangible. Because I can, as you're going through that, I'm going, oh yeah, that actually is my identity. Oh, that is my identity. Like, I can have these. I teach a bunch of middle schoolers at our church, and I always talked about people going in with a plan, but it's your standards.
Yeah.
You go into a situation and if you don't have standards, you're just going to do whatever the standards are that are there, whether a good situation or a bad situation. So it's also about surrounding yourself with good people, and all of those things all kind of come out of those 3 things. Which one do you think is the hardest to work on? I mean, your story is your story, but maybe out of those 2.
Well, I think that's a good question. I mean, I think with your story, right, I think it's easy to believe some lies that you may, believe about yourself. Whether it's, you're not good enough, or you're not liked, or you need to perform for other people to like you, or whatever it is, like, or you get into a big situation in a game and you failed in the past, so it's like, oh, this repeating thing that's going to happen again. The thing that I like the most about the story aspect is, like, you get to write the story that you want to have for your life. Can you, like, say every single detail? No, but what I like to say is, like, you get to assign the meaning to each event that happens to you. So, right, like, if there's a negative event in the past that happened to you, like, you can dwell on that and think of it in a negative way, or you can ask yourself, hey, like, this happened to me, I can't change it. What opportunity, or what can I change about my perspective that's going to help me grow, so that if maybe it happens next time, I'm better able to respond to that. Or, it's changing your mindset to look for the opportunity rather than dwell on something that may have happened to you that wasn't, something that you would have chosen. And it's the same thing going in the future too, is like, if you're not thinking about your future in the long game, 30, 40, 50, 60, 100, 100 years from now, depending on how old you are, right? Like, kind of want to work backwards and say, hey, this is where I want to end up. This is the story that I want to have for my life. Based on that story, what are the things that I need to do on a daily basis? And this is when we talk about our standards, right? Like, our story tells us our long view. Now, based on that long view, we can kind of develop standards for our life and how we want to live on a daily basis. So, I mean, I think it's easy to get derailed with our story a little bit, but I think a lot of people too get lost on the standards. And what I like to think about is, okay, the world for the most part tells me to live one way, right? What's the way that's going to be most honoring to God? Also, help me live out the story that I want to live, right? So it's like, it's two pieces, right? I'm not delusional to say that I can do anything and everything that I want in my life. Like, I don't think that's necessarily what it's about, but it's like, hey, can we paint like this beautiful vision for our life, whether it's, inside of sports or outside of sports? It doesn't really matter. And then based on that vision, okay, I'm going to start to develop some of these standards that are going to help me live in that way. Right. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. I love actually what we talk about with the putting different, not timeline, but like your story. You can like say like, hey, what does that story look like? That's actually like kind of a definition of trauma. Is when you have a traumatic life, something happened in your life, it's
Mhm.
your brain going, this is what this moment is. I don't know if you've ever known anybody with the yips, but it actually like lives in the brain. And that's like the goal of some of the cognitive stuff that even we do is like to move that memory from short term to long term. So you can have, so I think that story is so important because if someone's like, oh yeah, my dad when I was 7 said I'm not good, and that's my blocker and that's my anxiety every time that happens, that's a trauma event that someone has to work through to go, no, 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 let's redo that. Let's, kind of, through mindset or, some of the tools that we use to try to move that into a long-term part of the brain. So you go, I don't think about that anymore. Like, it happened, but I'm not dwelling on it.
Well, I think what's cool is, where you're coming from too, is like, it's not just, how we process it mentally, but it's also like there's a physiological component
Mhm.
to it too. So I
Yep,
think
yep.
what you're doing is fantastic. And if we can combine those two things, right, the psychological and the physiological component to it, it's like, okay, now we can get in a really good spot and really understand our story, and help us, move on from that event, heal from that event, both physically and psychologically and emotionally.
Well, also concussions. Concussions play a huge role in that in the brain. So I mean, baseball is not as big for concussions, but if you want to go like football, there's so many of those stingers and things like that, and so you have this cognitive decline, but then you also have this like mindset decline too, because if they're not able to process things or their response inhibition's not good, off the field, that's where you get the guys who are getting in trouble. It's like, okay, let's look at their concussions. Let's look at their, kind of their history of things. But anyway, but yeah, I think this story helps so much. And I love that identity piece as being the foundational because it goes into everything else. it flows into nutrition, it flows into relationships, or it flows into all these different things. So I love that that's kind of like your big core. What would you say to, like, because I know you talk to on the player side, individual, but let's talk to a coach. He's got 40 guys. How does he have an impact? Like, what can he do to help with? I mean, you were a coach too. How did you see it as a group setting? Because I asked this question too. I'll ask this first question first, and then go to this question. From a player standpoint, mindset, identity, all those different things. You had one set. How did it transfer into being a coach now?
With his mindset, with his, habits that he currently has, with his background. So the challenging part, but also the fun part as a coach is like you have to learn to talk to each player as an individual. And this is nothing new, but like the most important thing as a coach, and which I was doing as a player, and from in college all the way up through, is like trying to develop trust with your teammates, and then as a coach with the players that are playing under you, for you, etc. So I think like the relationship aspect is number one, right? Like you are there to develop a really good relationship so that you can make an impact on that player, right? If the relationship isn't there, there's going to be no impact. The impact is going to be stunted, or it's going to be really delayed. So as a coach, like what I was trying to do, what I am trying to do now is to develop those relationships as quickly as possible. Develop the trust. Part of the trust too is being competent as a coach. Like you have to know what you're talking about too. You can't just be their best friend. But developing that relationship, developing trust, show that you're competent with what you're talking about, and that dives into, hey, what are your standards, and are you pursuing excellence as a coach? But being able to do so and knowing that each of your players is different and individual. But again, like I think everything starts with developing trust, and let's say, hey, do you care for that athlete as an individual, not just because of their output on the field or the performance on the field?
Who is somebody who did that well for you?
I had a bunch of different types of coaches growing up, which I think helped me kind of like take on this perspective. I can remember back to, I don't know, I was probably 12 or 13 years old and playing soccer. And I was a sweeper. I wasn't a great soccer player, but I was fast, but I was pretty physical. Like I was the last line of defense. And the coach there, like I had to be vocal as a sweeper and kind of like dictate the defense and other players on how they're positioning. And this is kind of like the first memory I have as of a coach really impacting me. There's coaches like my parents both coached me earlier on in my career, but like as I started to get a little bit older, this is kind of like the first memory that I have of like real impact in terms of like me becoming a leader. Again, just like getting to know my voice and understand my voice and hear my voice. When I first started to try to do this and control like positioning of the players in the field, I was quiet and like didn't really want to, speak that loudly, so to say. But this coach, again, like in his own good way, was like, nope, you can be louder. Nope, you can do this. Nope, I need it louder. And he just continued to push me, push me, push me to the point where I was very comfortable doing it on the field and leading, three or four other players around me. So I think that's for me where it started. I had another basketball coach in high school where, I was, again, kind of same thing. I wasn't a great basketball player on the skill side, but he pushed me to become a shooter and just keep shooting. Didn't matter if I was missing, didn't matter what was going on in the game around me. It was like, no, I want you to shoot. So he kind of instilled that self belief on the physical side of things as well. And there are other coaches along the way too that was just like, just continuing to encourage me and continue to, step into the role of leader in who I was, whether that was in college, whether that was, early on in my career. Just continue to have these voices speak to me, encourage me about, hey, like continue what you're doing and building me up in that way, and just, hey, like you're doing the right thing. I see you. And so like those, I would say those three things were pretty formative for me, obviously as a player, but for me now as a coach, being able to turn around and do that for the players that I'm coaching on the baseball side or the performance side.
What's something a coach did to you, or you've seen as a coach, that you will never do? Because for me, I had some great coaches, and I had some coaches that were awful to me. And I can looking back on my journey in baseball and in athletics and go, if a coach had, for example, I'll just give you a little example of it as maybe you think about it. But I had a coach who just wanted to punish everybody the same way. I had a couple guys on my team that were just knuckleheads. And if they were knuckleheads, the whole team got in trouble for it. And I hated that because it was just like corporal punishment. I'm like, I didn't do that. But he's like, I need to work on this guy. So yeah, I need to teach him. I'm like, but for me, I just want to play baseball. So anyway, I'm just wondering that would be something for me is don't you're going to have, everyone's going to be different in the way that they're, you might have a kid who you need to be really hard on him and that's going to, you get the most out of him, but you can't do that for everybody. So
I agree.
That's my story.
No, I agree. I mean, I think that's such an important point too, is again, it goes back to all of our athletes are individuals. Some you may have to push, some you may have to hold more accountable. Some, you can let the reins go a little bit looser and just let them go and let them play. Because everybody responds a little bit differently. The thing about it for me, I think the one thing that has actually really formed me as a coach this was not something that was intentional by the coach that, I was working with. But so I was back up to 20, I want to say 20, I think it was 2016. It was my year in high. I was playing in Rancho Cucamonga, California.
Best city name in the world.
Right, the Quakes. And I was struggling at the beginning of the year, and we had a couple coaches come in. They were actually kind of outside hitting consultants, and they weren't really on our team. And they would kind of rove around to the different affiliates within the Dodgers organization. And they work with me. There was couple guys. They work with me consistently, over the course of 1 to 2.5 months, something like that. And it was the fastest I had seen results in my career. I went from the year before, decent year, hitting 265 with 4 or 5 homers, and the next year I finished in high A, was hit 280 with almost 20 homers, something like that. So there was a big jump in the performance side, the result side of things that year, and a lot of it had to do with these coaches and how they got me to think about my swing and change my mechanics even during the season. Fast forward, about a year and a half later. So the next year I played in Double A, had a really good first couple months, was Double A All-Star, ended up tearing my oblique. So I missed the last 3 months of the season that year, unfortunately. But that off season, my brother and I flew out to California to work with these guys for a few days, kind of get back in shape before spring training. And when I had gotten out there, it seemed like they had taken a little bit of a different approach in how they work with me. So the first time it was like, hey, let's work with your strengths and what you do really well. And let's just kind of add a couple of these, drills to your routine, help you kind of gradually change your movement patterns and understand the swing a little bit better. And then the next time when I got out there during the off season, a year and a half later, again, they weren't speaking to me in a bad way. They were just, kind of normal coaching, how I had experienced it before. But essentially it was like, no, you can't really do that. You're not going to have the success hitting that way. And it was, in my eyes, how I had been hitting for the last year and a half, and I had some good results. And at the time, as a player, because they had helped me so much, a year and a half ago, year and a half prior, I was definitely skeptical, but I was like, all right, these guys have helped me out. They know what they're talking about. I'm going to kind of move in this direction, change some mechanical things, change some things about my routines. And so, I kind of lost my feel for the swing. That, like I said, it's still dealing with oblique injury a little bit. I had dealt with some other illness, which did not help me feel my best physically. But for me, looking back, I wish I had trusted my gut more as a player, knowing to say, hey, this doesn't seem right to me. This is not working with my strengths as a player. And for me now as a coach is okay, what I'm trying to do is I am trying to just figure out what you do well as a player, and I'm going to try to add to that. I'm just very more aware of how I'm speaking to athletes, how they're responding because of that, I would say, because of that incident. Again, they weren't doing anything bad or negative.
Mm-hmm.
They were just trying to help me in the way that they knew how. But for me as an athlete, I needed to know myself and be my own best coach. And that's one thing that I talk about a lot is for me, especially on the baseball side of things, is my goal as a coach is to help my athletes become their own best coaches. help them know themselves as good as possible. Not only so that, when I'm not there, they can figure it out, but so that they can, trust what they're doing and believe in what they're doing. Like I want it to be as much as possible player led. And for me, I'm there as a guide, I'm there as a support to help them kind of, again, become their own best coach.
I think that's great. I think just for me as a player, sometimes I'm such a people pleaser that everyone's like, you do this. Okay. I got to do this. 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 And so I think and then the guys on my team who weren't, and they were seen as like, oh, they don't never listen to the coaches, but they also bat third. And I'm like, oh, well, maybe there's something to do with that. I look back later on it. I'm like, maybe the guy who was a little bit more of like, no, I know how to play. And the coach was like, oh, he's so uncoachable, but he hits bombs. Like, oh, maybe he had something insight there. But how would you approach a player then? Say you're looking at nutrition, they eat bad. You don't want to be like, hey, your strength is eat more junk food, because I think there's certain things you want to able to say like, hey, you probably should improve this because it's going to help you, in life type of a thing. But how do you approach that when it's like, no, you can't, like in order to get better, because you want to help them be their own coach, but you also want to expose like, this is probably hurting you.
Yeah, I know. I mean, that's a great question. I mean, we want to have honest self-evaluation and evaluation of where we are, whether it's nutrition or on field. We have to be able to properly evaluate where we are. When it comes to nutrition or recovery or something like that, it's like I'm going to be very upfront and honest. We can talk about diets and all of this, but there's some things within nutrition that you're going to have to hit. Like if you're performing a lot, like and you're trying to put on muscle or maintain, like you're going to have to hit some sort of macro count. We can talk all day long about different types of diets, etc. I think that's a conversation for a different time. But again, we're going to start with being pretty honest and open about where we're at. But what I try to do is I try to co-create a plan with my athletes. So it's not just me telling them what to do. I'm just like, hey, I'm bringing them on board. We're going to do this together. We're going to figure out this together so that they have a voice and they're empowered and they feel like they're part of this. There are some players who are saying, hey, like, just tell me what to do and I'm going to do it. Right. And like some people respond differently. But for the players that aren't necessarily there quite yet, aren't willing to make that drastic of a change, okay, let's figure out what's going to work for you. Right. So I'm I don't know if you've heard this quote too, but talking about like workout routines. The best workout is the one that you're going to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So like we just have to take that first initial step. We're not trying to, go from A to Z right away. We're trying to go from A to B to C. If you can go from A to F, okay, sure, we'll do that. But again, what I'm trying to do is go as fast as I can with guys as long as they're willing to change and as long as they can sustain that change. Everybody's different, so I'm going to try to meet them where they're at. But I think what it comes down to is just like sitting down with them, co-creating the plan, making sure that they have some agency in what we're doing. Like I said, there's some guys that are like, hey, just tell me what to do and I'm going to do it. I think those guys are, few and far between. But for the most part, we're going through and co-creating a plan together.
So I think we have a great foundation of like where you came from, what you're doing. With 7-pillar, how do you do that? Like, what's the mechanics of it? If you're talking to a coach or player, you're like, hey, this is what we built for you. Based on my experience, this is what we've built for you.
Yeah. So the cool thing that we did with 7-pillar is we built out a platform so that coaches and athletes could train all of the 7 pillars, right? Nick and I took everything that we learned, researched, had exposure to as athletes and coaches in our professional careers. We said, hey, as a 14, 15, 20, 25-year-old, this is all the information that we wish we knew. And it's packaged very easily. It's very convenient. It's on an app. You can do it on your phone. So that, again, like we are basically distilling all the information down, making it very simple. Hey, here's where you start. This is how you're going to train your mind. This is how you're going to get the most out of your life and career in all the 7 pillars. So, with our app, we have like masterclass style courses. We have a few, different buckets of content on there, which is, interactive masterclass style courses. So we're not just like, you're not just reading it, right? You're reading some content, you're going through video, you're writing down answers to questions and prompts that you have, going through identity and mindset leadership type content. We have guided audio tracks, pre-game, post-game, we have recovery audio tracks help guys get in the right mindset, to help them kickstart recovery processes, whatever it is. There's a bunch of different areas that we can use to guide audio tracks. We have digital journals, which are super helpful. Not everybody likes carrying around a journal with them, but from self-evaluation process to intention setting, like we think that journaling is a huge tool that people can use in terms of boosting their mental performance. We have protocols, PDF printouts for players and coaches to use on the recovery side for nutrition, all these things that are going to basically cheat sheets to help them. Hey, let's distill the information down. Let's make it as simple as possible, as actionable as possible. And so basically, like with the app, we are giving, we're giving athletes and coaches all the information that we wish we had when we were, coming up with the system. Everything that works that for us and for other people. And so far, we've had really good results with it. So,
I mean, it's amazing. I think, you're taking all of your experience you've ever had, you know, and your degrees and everything, and it's so cool to see you and your brother doing this too. Like, you've had different journeys and different experiences and probably different personalities too. In the way you teach and everything like that. But to be able to do it together, has that been fun?
yeah, no, it's been awesome. I mean, he's 2 years older than me. We got the chance to play together in high school. We trained every off season together as professionals. He was 2 years ahead of me, but every off season, come back home to East Meadow, Massachusetts. We would train together, hitting, defense, all the things, and we've obviously become best friends over the years, and now that we're both out of professional baseball, we've been able to build this thing together too. So it's been cool to kind of transition from, players, for me as a coach, to now diving into seven pillar, becoming entrepreneurs, becoming, high level performance coaches, and just trying to make as big of an impact as we can. And we do individual coaching with our athletes too, but like with the app, it's like we want to make as big of an impact as possible. Obviously, we can't individually coach every athlete and coach out there. So we wanted to package it in a way and say, hey, like guys, these are the resources that you need to thrive as a human being and as an athlete. Please take advantage of them. They're right there in the app. This is, coming from, you know, 25 plus years of experience as professional athletes and coaches at the highest level. So we hope people take advantage of it. We know there's a lot of good stuff in there. So.
Yeah, scalability is a huge thing, especially when it comes to information. And if you're teaching somebody how to coach themselves, just letting them have the resources just to be able to pull in and be like, yep, I'm doing this. Yep, I'm doing this. Like, I think it's a huge thing. I mean, I think coaching is also a very interesting thing because you have a lot of ego in coach too, where it's like, I told them to do this. I did this, rather than being like, no, I just was a guide for them and they were able to go along with with information that I gave them.
Yeah, I mean, you definitely see a lot of that. For me, again, like it's easier for me as a coach because, like, as a player, it's like the player is the one that's doing the work. They're the one that's performing. So for me as a coach, it's like, okay, my job is to guide you and help you become your own best version. But like, I'm not doing the work. You're doing the work and you're performing. So like, I'm not going to take the credit for that, and nor should I. So yeah, I mean, I think just going back to the app is like trying to give coaches and athletes just frameworks to train by, to live by, and again, like those frameworks help make it digestible, but like they help make it actionable on a daily basis. Hey, like these are a few core things that I need to do. These are a few core perspectives that I need to take, and it goes into some pretty good detail surrounding that. But again, the basis of it, hey, what's the framework that you're living in?
Love it. Well, where can people find you? Let's wrap it up here because I think what I loved what you said was that definition of identity. I think that's because again, so vague of what it is, but I love your three S's. But yeah, where can people find you? Where can people, if they want to be like, hey, I want to know more about where you guys are building, where can people find you?
Yeah, check out our website at sevenpillar.co. You can follow us on Instagram. We have our individual accounts for myself and my brother Nick, and we also have our seven pillar account on Instagram and X too. So check out our website, give us a follow. and you can find more information there.
You guys have great marketing too. Your website's awesome. It's you guys are doing things with excellence on all
We
on
try.
on
We try. Yep, that's one of our standards for sure.
so it looks great. Well, thank you for your time. Love it. I'm actually would be excited to do another one just based off of like nutrition or something, one of these other pillars, because I think they're fascinating.
Awesome.
Right,
Well,
right.
thank you for having me.
Absolutely.